Let's do it.
Short circuit MIG welding over hot rolled mill scale can give you some problems. This is 3/8 inch thick bar stock that's been sitting outside for a while, so it's got a little rust on it too. I'm going to make a T-joint weld using really low settings and doing some things wrong just to illustrate a point. I'm going to use a really long stick out like I shouldn't do, and I'm going to keep the arc not on the leading edge of the puddle, but riding back on the middle of the puddle and just letting the puddle flow ahead. You shouldn't do that with short circuit MIG welding. You want to keep that arc on the leading edge of the puddle, especially on hot rolled mill scale, because you just don't have that arc chewing through that mill scale like you need it. Let's do a little quick brake test on this. We'll put a forward wrench on here, and with very minimal effort, it just snaps. Hardly, I could have done it with one hand easily. It just didn't bite through the mill scale. Now I welded this at really low settings, but just to illustrate the point that if you're not careful with short circuit MIG and welding over hot rolled mill scale, you got problems. It didn't even penetrate into the root. It just laid up against there. And straight line, you don't want to see a straight line on a fillet weld brake test. Now let's compare that to the recommended settings, much higher settings, and I'm going to be making an effort to hold a much tighter stick out, and I'm going to try to stay up close to the front of the puddle. It's kind of chasing me here, but I'm staying up close to that leading edge of the puddle, and I actually made a little bit longer weld here than I intended to, but you're going to see the difference anyway. It's going to be obvious. We'll put the wrench on here too, and we'll try to break this. Now I'm going to put all my weight on here. My feet are going to lift off the ground here in a minute. It's not budging so far. Not even a little bit. So when you use recommended settings and you stay on the leading edge of that puddle, it just works a lot better. You got a lot better chance of biting through the mill scale. And in this case, I really penetrated. And we'll take a quick look at that here in just a second. With a fillet weld brake test, it'll often break. That's the whole point of the test, but you want to take a look at the root and see if it bit in. And it did. Even though it's got a very thin throat, it really bit in because I used those good, hot, recommended settings. Well, let's go back to the really cold settings now, but let's clean the mill scale. This is one of the best wheels I've found for cleaning mill scale. It's got a waffle pattern on it that prevents it from loading up. So I'm going to shine that mill scale up to clean, bright metal, not just polish it over. And I'm going to do it on both members. I'm going to get rid of that rust in the mill scale. And then we're going to weld it at those very same really cold settings, but using a slightly different technique. I'm basically just going to trace the leading edge of the puddle so that that'll keep my arc on the leading edge of the puddle. So using the same exact settings as I did on the first weld, but keeping my arc on the leading edge of the puddle and not having mill scale to contend with, we should see a different result. I would never weld at these cold settings on 3/8 inch thick steel, clean or not. I'm just trying to illustrate a point. I'm doing that V technique, keeping the arc on the leading edge of the puddle. I cleaned all the mill scale off to clean, bright metal. Now let's put the wrench on it and see what we got. Start off using just one hand, put a little pressure, nothing. Both hands, put almost all my weight on it, now all my weight on it, not really moving much, so we're going to have to get a cheater bar. Because that last one, when it gave, it kind of tweaked my back, and I don't want that anymore. Alright, so put a cheater bar on here, and now we're going to break it. And eventually it gives, but it takes a whole lot to make it give. Again, same low settings that I used on that very first cold weld, but no mill scale. I repeat, no mill scale. It's a difference maker with short circuit MIG sometimes. The amount of force I put on this compared to that first one with the hot rolled on there, night and day.
There's a lot of difference in mill scale. Like on square tubing, small diameter square tubing, you've got a very thin mill scale. A lot of times you don't even have to clean it. On hot rolled steel, thick plate, it can be really thick, and short circuit MIG has limitations. So for short circuit MIG on anything important, clean that mill scale. See you next time.